Good morning, Year 5. It's Monday morning's English here. So for today, these are the things we are going to need. A pen or pencil, your ruler, your colouring pencil or colouring pens, and you might want some scrap paper just if you want to write down anything as we go through. So let's get cracking. We're going to be using direct speech today. That's the aim of today, to use direct speech in our writing. But before we do that, let's have a bit of total recall. Let's look back at the learning that firstly we did with Mrs. Lee last week, the use of adverbials in our writing. I'd like you to use the picture on the left to create a sentence that contains an adverbial. If you've done that, could you have a go at creating a compound sentence about that picture? Or even a complex one? Okay, how did you do? Well, you'll all have different answers, but here's an idea of what you might have done. So in this sentence, in the cage, the lion prowled in front of the man. In the cage is not just an adverbial, it's a what? A fronted adverbial, that's right. Now, this sentence has actually got two adverbials in it because I've also got in front of the man. And this is also an adverbial. The lion prowled is the main clause, and then I've got two adverbials alongside it. Let's look at the compound sentence. The compound sentence, the lion was hungry and the man looked tasty. In this sentence, I've got two main clauses. The lion was hungry, the man looked tasty. And I've joined them using the coordinating conjunction, and that gives us a compound sentence. What other coordinating conjunctions might you have used for your compound sentence? Well, you could have used but, or you could have used or. Complex sentence, well, here we don't have a coordinating conjunction. We have a subordinating conjunction because we've got a subordinate clause as the lion prowled up and down. That's the subordinate clause. The main clause in this sentence is the photographer moved with him. That is the main clause. Now, the subordinating conjunction that we've used is as, but there are loads of different ones that you might have used in yours. Today, we're going to look at characterization through direct speech. Characterization is a way of describing how the author develops the personality of the characters in a story. In most stories, the characters are integral to the movement of the story. We could not really have the story without the characters within it. And a good writer will make the characters behave in certain ways as the story develops. In fact, in most stories, we see the events through a character's eyes. And bigger and more detailed characters usually create better stories. Characterization comes through what characters say and do. And characters come to life through their actions and through the words that they say, and crucially, how they say them. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So in this example, the old king stood up and gazed around the room. Everyone fell silent. "I will not wait," he roared. "I must have porridge and I want it now." Some of the word choices from the author tell us about the character. For example, this one here, he roared. This particular choice of speech verb is indicating to us someone who's willing to roar at other people, who will shout and demand what he wants. Talking of demanding, using words like "I must have" and "I want it now" tell us more about this particular character. Now, when we're going to use direct speech for a character, for using in our stories, we need to make sure we're using the right punctuation rules. So I wonder if you could pause here and remember the 4 key rules for punctuating speech. Okay, did you say any of these? The first one is we use inverted commas to begin and end speech. Now, we might know these as speech marks, but we prefer to use the words inverted commas. These are the small little commas that go above the text, above the line. They look a little bit like this. Sometimes people use 2, but I prefer to just use 1. They contain everything that's said. All the words that are said by our character go within the 2 pairs of inverted commas. We almost always use a capital letter to begin the speech. So after a pair of inverted commas comes a capital letter. We must also then use punctuation before we end the speech, before our second set of inverted commas. Now we can use 4 different punctuation choices depending on what's being said. We can use a full stop to end the sentence, a comma if the sentence is going to continue, an exclamation mark if it's an exclamation or we want to show raised volume, or we can use a question mark if the person is asking a question. The last rule we have for punctuating speech is that when we have a new speaker, we use a new line. So the rule is commonly known as new speaker, new line. I sometimes like to know it as change of speaker, new line, because if the speaker changes to another person, we use a new line in our text. Okay, so here is a piece of text that contains some dialogue, and I wonder if you can pause the video here and spot all those pieces of speech punctuation within the text. I'll just scroll it down for you. Okay, here we go then. The text reads, Mrs. Jones walked through the front door and into her familiar home. So this doesn't contain any speech, so it doesn't show any of the speech punctuation rules. In the second sentence here we've got, hello, I'm back, Mrs. Jones called out, expecting the usual reply. So in green there you can see the 2 inverted commas used to begin and end the speech. In yellow, the capital letter that starts the speech, and then at the end I've got an exclamation mark to show that Mrs. Jones is calling that out loudly. Now after reply, you'll notice that we start a new line. This tells us we've got a new speaker coming. We're up here, said a distant voice from the very top of the house. So here, the greens there showing the inverted commas, the capital W to start the speech, and the comma to end the speech, because after the speech there, the sentence is continuing. Again, after the word house, we're starting a new line. That's because the speaker is changing from the distant voice over to this new speaker, where it's going to be Mrs. Jones again. What are you doing up there? Mrs. Jones inquired. So what's the difference between these 2 speech sentences? Well, here I'm ending the sentence with a question mark because she's asking a question. I've still got my inverted commas and capital letters to start. Now the last one here is working slightly differently. I'm going to use a piece of split speech. So inverted commas to start, come up. Now you'll notice that this one, after come up, it says came the reply and find out for yourself. So the reply is come up and find out for yourself, but the written text came the reply is going in the middle of the speech. So I'm splitting the 2 pieces of speech, but I'm using inverted commas at the start and end of both sections. I'm also using punctuation at the end of both sections, but I'm only using a capital letter at the start of the first section. The second section here, because this person's sentence is continuing, come up and find out for yourself is the full sentence. I don't need a capital letter for that A. So here we go. How can we use speech to convey a character? Now, these 3 characters are all going to say the question, what happened? So their text, their speech is going to be what happened. But if I follow it up with some different word choices, I can then indicate more about their character. So in the first example, she whimpered, her hands shaking. What happened? She whimpered, her hands shaking. This tells us that she's scared or nervous, afraid. How do we know that? Well, we've got the speech verb whimpered. That tells us she's saying it in a very soft and fragile voice. I've backed that up with some actions. Her hands are shaking as she's speaking. This tells us she's nervous or afraid. The second example, what happened? He exclaimed with delight. So here we're using the speech verb exclaimed, and then we're using the adverbial with delight to show how the exclaiming was done. It was done with delight. This tells us that the character is full of joy and is very happy. The last one, what happened? He raged as he clenched his fists. Now, in this example, I've used the speech verb raged to show anger and fury in his voice. And as the speech is happening, I'm running alongside it, a subordinate clause, as he clenched his fists. So I'm using a common physical attribute of anger, the clenching of fists, alongside the speech. This is how we can show character through dialogue and through speech. Okay, we're going to use a silent film today and add our own dialogue to it. Okay, so let's watch this film together, and you can think about maybe what might be being said by the characters. Okay, so I'll put a link to the video in the description if you need to watch it again when you're writing your work in a moment. Our aim then is to use direct speech in a retelling of the story of the boy and the monster. So we're going to tell that story with dialogue, with the two characters communicating with each other. The Wilf options are these. Bronze, I've given you a dialogue sheet with some ideas of what the two characters could say to each other. You'll need to add the correct punctuation and a little bit of description using some speech verbs to tell the story. Silver, you're going to create your own dialogue for the scene. And gold, you're going to create the dialogue and really focus on conveying the two characters in the film. Tell me a little bit more about the boy and the monster. If you want to, at the end, when you've finished, you could use a color code to show the 4 speech rules, just like I did on that slide. I'll just go back to it in a minute, just like I did here. Okay? Right, now, let's have a little look at what this might look like. I'm going to use the bronze sheet to create a waggle. This is what the bronze sheet looks like. Now, it's worth saying silver and gold don't turn off here, because if you need a little bit of a helping hand just to get started on your own inventions, it's worth looking at this sheet and looking at my work under the visualizer just for a couple of minutes. So I'm going to start my text with a short description of the scene. Very, very short, because I'm focused mainly on the speech today. So I've got the young boy sat alone with a plump marshmallow toasting in the fire. Out of nowhere, I just want to put a comma after that fronted adverbial, thank you very much. He heard a rustle of leaves behind him. Who's there? He called into the darkness. So I've got inverted comma to start the speech, capital letter, punctuation to end, and inverted comma to end. Because I've got a question mark, new sentence, he called into the darkness. The speaker's continuing, but I needed a new line because I ran out of room here. Stay back. He tried to sound brave. I mean it. So I've split this speech, stay back, I mean it. I've split it with he tried to sound brave between the two pieces of speech. New paragraph. We're going to have the monster now coming out of the trees. Out of the shadows came a huge monster. Now, that's quite a short sentence, really. If I was writing my own story, just a story of the boy and the monster, I might put a bit more description to the monster. But today, my title is direct speech. I focused on that speech. So I don't want to end up with a page of brilliant description all about a monster and just two pieces of speech. That's not the aim of the game. So just a short description and then, what's that then? The creature's voice was a rumbling thunder from his giant frame. Now here I've really focused on some characterization. I've not said, what's that then? Said the monster. I've given some more detail about the creature's voice. I've said about his giant frame. I've said about his huge size. It looks tasty. The young boy's eyes fell to the marshmallow as he realized he was not himself on the menu. So there's the starting point. What's the next one? Well, I've got then, it's a marshmallow, it's mine, said the boy. You might change that a little bit, but I'll stick with what I've got. Okay. So, new line for a new speaker. It is, sorry, the apostrophe to show the missing A. It's a marshmallow. And it's mine. So, inverted commas, capital letter, full stop to end the speech. The boy, oh no, didn't want an F there, I want was first, was feeling strangely courageous. Right, I'll let it run from there. Now, you don't need to finish the story, don't need to tell the whole story, just aim to use maybe 10 pieces of speech, something like that. Okay, so that's our aim for today. We're going to use direct speech in the retelling of the story. Okay, I hope it goes well, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.